Parshall, who's has her own, as Ray said, radio program across the country on the Moody Radio Network, and longtime veteran broadcaster. Janet, how are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you, and it's been wonderful listening to both of you talk. Thanks for inviting me to be with you.
Are you in Virginia today? Are you traveling?
I am
or what?
indeed.
Okay.
We're good radio people, you know. We juxtaposition a number two, and hey, things just flow.
I hear you. Hey, Janet, I wanted you. We're about to play a clip from AFR that was on a couple of hours ago that I had not even heard myself, but I understand it's very powerful, and I'll set this up. This was a discussion that Fred Jackson had, who was substituting for Dan Celia, and he had a call regarding the trial about the Fort Hood massacre. And because that trial is going on now, as we all know, Nadal Hassan, Hassan, the man who allegedly, you have to say allegedly, until the man is convicted in a court of law. Technically, that's what you're supposed to say. So allegedly that murdered all these people. And he was a self-admitted jihadist. We all know that, an Islamic jihadist. And but the Pentagon says it was workplace violence. So anyway, this was a call that Fred got from, I believe, a mother of one of the soldiers, I believe, that was at the incident, at the scene. So other than that, I haven't even heard what we're about to hear, but Fred said it's powerful, and I wanted to play it, and then we'll get Janet's thoughts on it. Go ahead, play it.
Let's go to Diane in North Carolina. I'm anxious to talk to Diane because I see on my screen you say your son was one of those who was shot at Fort Hood, Diane.
Yes, my son Matthew was one of the 32 that was actually shot at Fort Hood.
How's he? He's one of the survivors, I'm assuming.
Yes. My son is a survivor. He
Thank
I
God.
wanted to just say, to start with, our son-in-law was at the World Trade Center when it went down. He's a survivor there. For 2 days, we thought he was dead. With my son Matthew, we didn't know for a long time if he was going to live or die. But the main thing is this. Our military knew Major Hassan had these tendencies.
Yes.
To this day, we don't have any rules or regulations that will protect those that are trying to protect us. We need to change. There's got to be some change in the military so that when they see somebody like Major Hassan, they knew that when he was in Washington, when he was at the hospital in Washington there, they knew he had these tendencies, and they did nothing to try to eliminate him from the service, to try to protect our soldiers. If we know we have somebody who is radicalized in the military, I don't understand why the military will not get him out. They say that they were afraid that it was somebody could claim that, I can't think of my words right now, I'm so sorry.
Religious prejudice or something of that nature.
Yes, exactly. That they couldn't let him out. The other thing I wanted to bring to people's attention, Major Hassan was directly behind my son. He heard him yell, Allah Akbar. Since he'd been to Iraq twice, he dropped directly to the floor, and he laid on the floor, and he said that the sounds and the smells weren't right. And he looked up, and he saw a master sergeant on his knees because he had been shot through the back. There was blood spurting out of his chest. He saw the gun aiming at this higher-ranking sergeant. And my son dove over that sergeant. My son was safe. He had not been shot. But my son dove over a higher-ranking sergeant to save him because that's what he's been trained to do. You save the higher-ups. He dove over him. He got shot once in the head, 3 in the back. When he tried to roll off, he couldn't get off the sergeant that he was protecting. He'd been shot so much in the chest that when he tried to raise up, the only thing he could raise up was his buttocks. His chest, he couldn't get up. Major Hassan saw that movement and shot him again. He has lost his urinary bladder, urethra, ureter, several feet of his intestines. That bullet came to rest on his left kidney. He's got fragments in his skull. The bullets in his skull. He's got bullets in his back. He's got fragments in his back. And for this act of heroism, I mean, I'm the mother, so his act of heroism, he gets nothing because the government has said this is workplace violence. They will not admit it was terrorism. And for that, he's not eligible for a Purple Heart. He's not eligible for any type of medal for saving a soldier's life and risking his own when he was perfectly safe. He gets nothing. I don't understand why. Where's the question on the fact that this was terrorism? This was definitely terrorism.
Well, and we've touched on this before. This thing has been covered up because of political correctness. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Diane, thank you for calling. Tell your son for us. We're so proud of him. And Godspeed to him.
That was Fred Jackson. Fred getting a little emotional with that live call this morning on Dan Celia's show on AFR Talk. Fred was substituting for Dan and took a call from North Carolina from a mom there whose son had an act of heroism. You heard it described there. It was my first time to hear it. Janet, what do you think about what she just shared?
Oh, stunning, isn't it? It's just absolutely stunning that political correctness isn't some just philosophically fuzzy way of thinking that's relegated to college campuses somewhere. As the saying goes, bad ideas have bad consequences. And as a result of that, there were people who were killed at the Fort Hood base. And not only that, but we're allowing a madman to defend himself who has said through his own words, the Bible says out of the abundance of the heart the mouth speaks, he has identified himself as a follower of Islam, as part of the Mujahideen, saying that Sharia law stands in stark opposition to the democratic principles of America. And so this man was a madman. Now, therein lies the challenge, I think, as we go ahead with this trial. And I was thinking of Screwtape Letters as the senior devil is teaching his young protege. He said one of the most effective tools we have is that we get man to believe that we don't exist. Well, Nadal Hassan can make himself look so mad that somehow that can create a kind of sympathy in the court of public opinion. I don't know if it will before the military court, but in the court of public opinion that you really can't put to death a madman. Well, there is another way of looking at it, and that is that we are seeing the incarnation of evil, that evil abounds, evil is real, and when a man shoots someone like Matthew multiple times and then sees Matthew moving yet again and unloads one more time into this heroic young man, if that isn't the definition of evil, I don't know what is. But unfortunately, good ideas in this post-Christian culture in which we live are being sacrificed on the altar of political expediency, self-centeredness, and, yes, political correctness as well. This is an open and shut black and white case of an Islamic terrorist who said in no uncertain terms, this is my worldview, I'm going to act on my beliefs, and as a result of that, lives were erratically changed, irreplaceably lost, and now as a result of that, we see political correctness has a very hefty price tag. I hope this serves as a wake-up call to America, but I'm afraid it won't. We're still dancing around phrases like whether or not we're at war with radical Islam, whether or not this is in fact a war on terror, a president who gives due deference to speeches in Egypt, thereby exciting the Islamic world, a presidency and administration that decides to tip their hat to the Muslim Brotherhood, the granddaddy of all terrorist organizations in the Middle East. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I want to respect the office, pray for the man in authority.
Right.
It doesn't mean I can't recognize bad ideas.
Talking to Janet Parshall, I got one question about this, what we just heard, and then I know Ray wants to comment too or ask you a question. All right, what happened here? This man was acting on his belief in Islam, that he had a Quranic duty, if you will. That's Quran I'm talking about, the holy book of Islam. And I know not all Muslims believe this, but there are plenty enough of them who do, that he was pleasing Allah by murdering the infidels. That was what his motivation was, this man, Hassan. All right. And he told the world that. He is not ashamed of that. Okay, so we know it's an act of terrorism based on Islamic Jihad or beliefs. Okay, when this case gets to the Pentagon, correct me if I'm wrong here as we go along here, Janet, then the Pentagon decides that we're not going to mention his motivation for killing people being Islamic jihadism. We're going to change this from what we all know it is, purposefully change this to say, no, it's workplace violence. Okay, here's my question to you, Janet. When intelligent people, assumedly, that make a decision to change reality, okay, they're saying, no, we're not going to admit to what we all know to be true because we're going to change it to something else. My question to you is, Janet, they have to, in their minds, be saying to themselves, we're changing reality in the name of a higher good, in the name of something that's more important than admitting that this was Islamic Jihad a terrorist attack. So my question to you is, do you have any idea, can you possibly fathom, can you help those of us who wonder why you would do something like this, why you would change reality in the name of what? What would be their motivation?
Exactly. In fact, as you were talking, I thought therein lies the problem. It begs the question, what greater good? What altered reality? What end game? I mean, John Adams said it beautifully. He said, facts are stubborn things. The man has decided to self-indict himself. That if I were his defense attorney, it would be, I'd be sweating buckets because I'd think to myself, how do I turn this around? But there's our first indication of the altered reality, Tim and Ray. The fact that no gag order was placed on this man is hugely important. I've looked back at some of the trials of other terrorists who have gone on trial, and one of the first things the U.S. government did was to muzzle the defendant, and they did it because they were not going to allow a platform to be built where they could spew their hatred and ignite the masses who share the same kind of worldview. So they wanted to tap that down by saying, you're not allowed to do this. Well, A, he's defending himself, so it's going to be bizarre. And again, if I were a defense counsel at the appellate level, I would say, well, he didn't understand the law. I've got multiple grounds for appeal here, so it's going to be a Pandora's box legally. But number two, last week Thursday, because he is allowed to represent himself, because there has been no gag order issued, he started spewing this whole business by calling himself Son of Allah, signed his name S-O-A, and we started getting some indications as to exactly how ardently entrenched in this worldview this individual is. But every time he opens his mouth, one can only imagine the terrorists within our own country and those observing outside the borders of our country, if they're not being incited to action because of what this man is doing on trial. This isn't some little misstep for political correctness. This is a lit fuse. In the meantime, we have embassies all over Northern Africa and the Middle East that are closed today because of the intelligence chatter at a higher level than it was before 9/11 and specific game plans set for Yemen. And this man speaks the way he does. It takes all of these people who subscribe to the same worldview that Nidal Hassan has, and it just absolutely becomes a catalyst for more activity. So it isn't just mistrial, and it isn't just malfeasance when it comes to American jurisprudence, even in a military court. It is an incitement to violence that puts the entire country at risk. Shame on those who've knuckled under this kind of pressure.
So, Janet, what you just said really raises another question. If you go back to 9/11, then go to the shoe bomber, and then go to these many other examples, and take the Boston Marathon bombers and take Major Hassan, the evidence is overwhelming. It's incontrovertible that there is such a thing as Islamic terrorism. It's aimed directly at the heart of the West. My question to you is, with the abundance of evidence going back to 9/11, even before then, why is there such a refusal in the mainstream media and in the White House and in certain parts of the elite establishment to even recognize this, much less talk about it?
Yeah, well, Ray, I love the question. And I love the fact that we are Christian communicators, all three of us, because we really do have a way of looking at these issues in a markedly different way. On the geopolitical level, I don't know if it has to do with oil. I don't know if it has to do with arms. I don't know if it has to do with security. I don't know if it has to do with trade secrets, all that stuff that good novels are made up of. But I want to appeal to a higher level. This is spiritual warfare. There's real darkness going on here, and When you ask why they would do this, I cannot begin to tell you from a mortal's perspective, but I can tell you that there's a spirit of deception and a spirit of confusion that's afoot in the midst of all of this. And the only thing that's going to change this kind of a circumstance is the human heart. You know, just Sunday night, I was very much in prayer over the weekend because Sunday night was the 26th or 27th day of Ramadan, and it's referred to as the night of power. And a lot of very observant Muslims during that particular day of Ramadan will spend the entire night, up all night, seeking the face of God. And we know the Bible says that if we seek him, we will find him. If we seek him with all our heart, he will be found, he tells us, himself. So my fervent prayer was that some who were going through this part of Ramadan would in fact come to know Jesus, this loving God who paid the penalty for their sins, and all of the month of fasting won't do anything to bring them into glory, but accepting the completed work of the cross will. So my prayer was that out of this darkness, some would step into the light of Christ. I think for the followers of Christ, as we're listening to these geopolitical issues out there, we have to understand that first, last, and always, this is a spiritual issue. We have the eyes of our men and women in authority that are scaled over. We have those who are caught in the snare of darkness. But if you want to make a terrorist somebody who loves his neighbor, introduce him to Jesus Christ. He's always been the answer.
Janet, thanks so much. What's the website for people that you have?
Thank you. In the Market with JanetParshall.org. In the Market with JanetParshall.org.
Our thanks to Janet Parshall and Dr. Ray Pritchard for co-hosting with me today, and thanks for listening, everybody. Straight ahead is the Bible teaching program of Dr. David Jeremiah, followed by the news, and then on with the day here on American Family Radio. Take care, everyone.